Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope I find you all well. Welcome to all new viewers, subscribers. It is a joy to have you here. Sorry there's been so many breaks between each video. It has been a rough ride, guys. I am not even gonna lie. This surgery and just the exhaustion. Obviously my body's still healing, so it's taking a bit of time. But my husband's not been well, and there's people in my family that's going through some spiritual warfare because they've recently come to the Lord. Praise the Lord for that one, and the years of prayers that's been going, to the Lord for my loved ones. It's such a blessing. But you're helping them walk that walk that you've walked, with the Lord. And obviously, when I came out of the occult, there was an almighty fight, and there still is. Like, any chance Satan gets to beat me with a stick, it happens. I just try to do the things in my power, the best for me not to give him the legal ground. So if it comes, I shall count it all joy, because it's just because I'm walking with the Lord and not because I've given him legal ground. So I will explain all of that stuff in another video, because I like to try and keep these videos solely about the chapters that we're reading, because not everybody cares about the other stuff, and that's great. So I'll do a separate video for that. I have got like 4 or 5 books sitting beside me, because I didn't know exactly which ones that I was going to read from, because we're actually in the middle of quite a few, aren't we? So I think I want to do the next chapter of Lambs to the Slaughter, Your Child and the Occult. If you would like to see the other chapter, well, I've only read one chapter of this book, then it's all in a playlist for you guys, so you can work through any of the books that I'm reading and find them in playlists. I'm also thinking about starting, and I never planned this, Two Babylons by Hislop. And it is a wonderful, very informative, very eye-opening book that I think will actually really help. So I think I might actually read that, and I love this because I actually found like an old copy of it, and I love the smell of old books. I'm never going to be one of them that reads it off a screen. I just love books. I love the smell of old books. So I think I might go ahead and start the introduction. It's only a couple of pages, so start the introduction and then go ahead and get a chapter read of that, because as you go through, it talks about old pagan worship and how that relates today, and how it looks in the religions today. So it's a wonderful book, honestly. It's so eye-opening. So let's do the chapter 2 of Your Child and the Occult. I've got all things stuck in these books as like where I've been reading and stuff, so yeah. So this one is the Humanist conspiracy. The precarious position in which we find our children and our society did not spring up overnight. Long before the term New Age ever appeared on the scene, attempts were being made to turn society away from Christianity and traditional values through control of the public school system. Why? Because no other institution in this country offers the same potential for the intensive and long-term mass indoctrination of such open, pliable and available subjects, namely 43 million public school students. Humanists have worked long and hard for over 150 years to ensure their domination of the public school system. They see their philosophies as salvation of the world, the solution to all our social ills. The only serious obstacle in the way of their utopia is Christianity, and it is an obstacle they have long been determined to remove. C. F. Potter, author of Humanism, A New Religion in 1930, said, "This education is thus the most powerful ally of humanism, and every American public school is a school of humanism. What can the theistic Sunday schools, meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children, do to stem the tide of a 5-day program of humanistic teaching?" Well, firstly, it doesn't matter. The Lord only needs one person, so that's their ignorance. For decades now, the humanists have used the classrooms of this country as their personal pulpits and seminaries for the propagation of their atheistic, socialistic beliefs. In the 1960s especially, there was an influx of humanistic programs presented as alternatives to the oppressive educational system of the day, i.e. reading, writing, arithmetic, are such a bore. So, bolstered by the findings of humanistic psychology, innovative educators develop techniques to help people validate themselves, to communicate more effectively with others, to enhance their self-concepts, to ask directly for what they want, to clarify their values, to express their feelings, to celebrate their bodies, to use their will, and to take responsibility for their lives. These techniques include role-playing, global education, journaling, transactional analysis, sex education, death education, various forms of psychological testing, and of course, situation ethics values classification. As a result, many of our children now know all about how corpses are embalmed, and many have written their own obituaries or suicide notes as class assignments. They have pooled their collective ignorance on relevant subjects ranging from nuclear war to homosexuality, euthanasia to birth control, all in the name of clarifying their values and morals. They have participated in survival games in which the children must decide from a list of qualifications who in their midst should be allowed to survive in the lifeboat or spaceship or fallout shelter or whatever. They know all about being planetary citizens and about the importance of redistribution of wealth in the world. They've learned all about sexuality and pornography in their sex ed classes. They know about the occult and witches, werewolves, astrology, Ouija boards, Great Spirit, the Mother Goddess. They know that to mention the Bible, God, and especially Jesus of Nazareth on a public school campus is to risk being sued by the ACLU. I just want to come back to, because I'll always speak on these things if I've lived through it or whatever as we're reading, because I'll forget. I've tried to always wait till the end and then I forget. When my children was at school and they was coming to the age of sex education. Now, I was ignorant before I was saved. I wasn't aware of it. I thought the school had the kids' best interest in heart, blah, blah, blah. And the school and the teachers, some of them may, but there's always the government and those people behind that don't. So, it was coming up time for my youngest to have sexual education. Now, when I went in and looked at not only what she was being taught, but in the years to come as she grew up through the school to year 6, we call in juniors, what they was being taught in year 6. So when they are 10, 11 years of age, they are taught sexual positions, that what they feel like. Like, honestly, I had some. I'm gonna have to do a video on this one day and actually get the pictures and stuff because people would not believe me. And they're actually telling the children that it feels good. Like, if that's not inciting children to engage in sexual activity below the age of, by law, if you're saying a child is not legally allowed to, have sex below the age of 16, because then it's classed as statutory rape to have sex with someone below the age of 16. And you're telling them at 10 and 11 years of age what happens and how to, perform these acts or, put a condom on, and then this feels good. And you may make this not like, I just couldn't comprehend in my head. And then I contacted the school and I said, I don't want my child being exposed to this. This is stealing children's innocence. And they says, well, it's mandatory. If they're in school, they have to have this. And even though I expressed that we're Christians and, this is against, how the Lord has laid down for us to live our life, doesn't matter. And this was also one of the reasons I decided to home educate my children. Because what? The level of corruption in schools is beyond. It is just ridiculous. So, anyway, just thought I'd share that quick little note. According to the statistics, what all too many of our children don't know is how to read, how to write, how to add 2 and 2 so it comes out to 4. They don't know geography or the facts of American history. They don't know what our system of government has meant to the preservation of freedom in the Western world. The results of these innovative humanist programs in our classrooms are something which every humanist can truly be proud of. Back in the 40s, before everybody got validated about the worst disciplinary problems in the classroom were chewing gum, running in the halls, talking, getting out of line, and not throwing waste paper into the basket. Now their values have been clarified, however, the children are coming to understand that Sidney Simon and other developers of values clarification have desperately wanted them to learn. that the values, moral codes, and beliefs of their parents and church are outmoded and irrelevant, and that neither parents nor church has the right to impose those values on them, that any value they choose for themselves is the right one, whether it be deciding to engage in premarital sex or deciding they are homosexual at the age of 11, or that they have the right to get an abortion or take drugs. As long as they have freely chosen their value and behaviour themselves, it's the right one. For there's no such thing as right or wrong, black or white. It would seem that we have validated an entire generation right into anarchy. Dr. Brock Chisholm, head of the World Health Organization of the United States, said that morality is a harmful perversion and advocated that the concepts of right and wrong should be done away with. It may be interesting to note that the inability to distinguish right from wrong still constitutes the legal definition of insanity in our courts. Sydney Simon frequently tells teachers that they have to get all that moralizing crap, excuse my language, guys, out of the classroom. So a lot of them did. And now we have an unprecedented epidemic of teen pregnancies. Our classrooms have become frontline battlefields, and the drug and suicide rate among our young people has skyrocketed. After 2 generations of clarified children, we're now reaping the moral chaos that the humanists have so diligently nurtured for us. How true is that? I mean, I don't know about the rest of the world, but the young of today here in the UK, it's absolutely mind-boggling the things they get up to, the lack of respect and the lawlessness that's going on. On our local Christmas market, there was youths basically just walking around with machetes, just don't care. Yeah, it was some gang thing, but this is in the middle of a city in the centre. Like, they had no regard for law, consequence, nothing. America loses its moral bearings. The 18th and 19th century forerunners of the humanists, the Unitarians and the Universalists, the Owenites and the Transcendentalists, and the Fabian socialists, had firmly established their morally relative and atheistic grip on the educational system of this country by the 1800s. The Owenites, founded by the father of modern socialism, Robert Owen, recognised that proper education was a prerequisite for the establishment of socialism. He and his followers were certain that if they could just educate the children of the country in their principles, they would even eventually be able to establish a socialist state. To do that, however, they had to liberate the people in general, and the children in particular, from the tyranny of Christianity and other outmoded beliefs. A crucial turning point came in 1805 when the Unitarians took control of Harvard University away from the Calvinists, from there sending out teachers whom they had carefully trained in their anti-Christian perspectives. According to one Universalist, Owenite, Orestes A. Brownson, 1803 to 1876, a great object was to get rid of Christianity and to convert our churches into halls of science. The plan was not to make open attacks on religion, but to establish a system of state schools from which all religion was to be excluded, in which nothing was to be taught but such knowledge as is verifiable by the senses, and to which all parents were to be compelled by law to send their children. Yeah, we all know when you remove the Lord from something, a devil will come back with demons 7 more times wicked than itself. So that was never going to be well, was it, guys? And this is like, you're seeing the fruits of that today in the world. Their goal, it would seem, has been achieved. A little at a time, they've prepared the way until finally in 1963, with the government ruling against school prayers and Bible reading, God was ignominiously booted off the campus, along with the moral code he established. Instead, the children are now taught that man is the measure of all things. They are taught that there's no such thing as absolutes in any area of life, especially morals. Morals and ethics are situational and relative. These lessons have been carefully absorbed by our entire society to the point where it's caused genuine alarm in some circles. Time magazine's cover article on May the 25th, 1987 screamed, "Whatever happened to ethics?" Assaulted by sleaze, scandals and hypocrisy, America searches for its moral bearings. Let us hope that America doesn't bother searching for these moral bearings in its classrooms. They're just not there, and haven't been for years. At Harvard University's 327th commencement exercises in June of 1978, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I hope I've said that right, survivor of Stalin's prison camps and defiant critic of the Soviet regime, set his entire audience on its collective ear with a scathing indictment, not of the Soviet Union, as one would expect, but of the West. On the campus of one of the institutions almost responsible for the deliberate destruction of the Judeo-Christian basis of our society, schools and ethics, he said, in the West, the idea of freedom stems from the humanistic idea that man does not bear any evil in himself. Life's defects are supposedly caused by a misguided social system. As a result, crime is now more prevalent in Western nations than in the lawless Soviet society. The cause of this moral poverty can be traced to a rejection of Christianity, with its sense of responsibility to God and society. As far as I know, Harvard has not invited him back to speak since. Sorry guys, let me silence that. Psyched out by the NEA, the last 20 years or so has witnessed an intriguing and escalating transformation. What used to be a classroom in which children were taught basic skills such as reading, writing, and arithmetic has now metamorphosized into a laboratory for teachers who are being encouraged to experiment with techniques designed to produce what the behaviorists call a total attitudinal change in the child. I'm so sorry, guys. Since this surgery, my hormones have gone a bit crazy. I'm struggling to pronounce words. I'm saying them wrong. I'm losing in mid-sentence, so I'm so sorry. We're going to fight through though, guys. The basic goal of education is change. Human change in desirable directions. This issue focuses attention upon the school as a change agent. The specific focus is on changing people. You will notice that the stated goal of education is to change people, not educate people. The two are not the same at all, as the National Educators Association, the NEA, knows very well. Education has not been a particularly high priority on their agenda for years, as even Reader's Digest pointed out in an article called Guess Who Spells Disaster for Education? None other than the powerful Education Association, as it plays politics and fights to block much needed reform in nation's schools. NEA President Mary Frutal points out that instruction and professional development have been on the back burner to us compared with political action. That political action agenda embraces radical socialism, world government, abortion on demand, gun control, decriminalisation of marijuana, sex education in schools, and nuclear disarmament. According to Dr. Samuel Blumenfeld, author of NEA, Trojan Horse in American Education, the NEA, in existence since 1857, is now the most powerful labour union in the country. It controls 71% of America's public school teachers, has a membership of 1.6 million, and is working hard to bring the rest under its care, whether they like it or not. Vanderbilt University Professor Chester E. Finn Jr. analysed the NEA's materials and find them pervaded by cohesive radical strategy. It includes the delegitimizing of all authority, save that of the state, the degradation of traditional morality, and the encouragement of citizens in general, and children in particular, to despise the rules and customs that make their society a functional democracy. The NEA is drifting into exceedingly dangerous waters and probably carrying more than a few teachers and pupils with it. We spend over $308 billion annually on education. That's more than the national budget for defence. And what do we have to show for it? About 60 million functional illiterates. Bill Bennett, now ex-Secretary of Education, said that he was sick and tired of schools that gobble tax money while graduating students who can't read or write, who also thoroughly and accurately stumped the NEA for being more interested in power, perks and protection than in teaching the young. Nevertheless, the NEA wants more money for their programs, telling us that this is what will solve the problem. As William Bowen points out in Globalism, America's Demise, it does not take a lot of time and money to educate children. It does take a lot of time and money to indoctrinate and modify their values. In order to change and modify the children, contemporary educational theories supported by the NEA encourage educators to use psychotherapeutic techniques such as role-playing, role reversal, psychodrama, encounter group sessions, journaling, sensitivity training, sometimes called T groups or encounter group, magic circles, psychological testing, games and questionnaires with open-ended questions designed to delve into the most private thoughts and beliefs of the child and his family. These techniques were originally developed by psychiatrists to be used in their work with seriously disturbed patients in mental hospitals. Some of the techniques, such as role-playing, are so sensitive and potentially dangerous that even experienced mental health workers hesitate to use them undiscerningly. Yet teachers around the country are being instructed to use them on their students, as applied in the classroom. These techniques are specifically designed to gain access to the inner workings of the child in order to release him from the outmoded values and beliefs of his parents and to improve him with the new and desirable humanist beliefs appropriate to global citizen they expect him to become. The children, you see, don't need educating in the view of these educators. What they need is therapy. Why? Because most humanist educators believe that our children are mentally imbalanced and emotionally disturbed. According to Dr. Chester Pierce in an address given to 2,000 teachers in Denver in 1973, every child in America who enters school at the age of 5 is mentally ill because he comes to school with allegiance toward our elected officials, toward our founding fathers, toward our institutions, toward this form of government we have. Patriotism, nationalism, and sovereignty. All of this proves children are sick because the truly well individual is one who has rejected all of those things and is what I would call the true international child of the future. If a child is brought up to love this country and all it has traditionally stood for is said to be mentally ill, Paul Branween asserts. Any child who believes in God is mentally ill. Not only that, but the American family structure produces mentally ill children. The NEA seems to be 100% behind the idea that all the children of this country are in need of therapy. In their report, Education for the 70s, they state that schools will become clinics whose purpose is to provide individualized psychosocial treatment for the student, and teachers must become psychosocial therapists. Isn't it funny that, where they talk about a child that's brought up that loves its country, they say they're mentally ill. Here in the UK, if you love your country and you want to stand for this country, they call you far right. So, yeah. The basic beliefs. So, what are they telling our children in schools if they're putting that all out in the media just because you love your country and you don't want to see it absolutely destroyed? The cloning of future generations. The basic beliefs of humanism that are spawning these outrageous teachings and statements we are hearing from our educators and policymakers are clearly spelled out for us. In the first Humanist Manifesto, written in 1933 by John Dewey, the father of progressive education, it was later updated by Paul Kurtz in the second Humanist Manifesto in 1973. It's well worth taking the time to list some of the tenets of these manifestos. Since the documents were signed primarily by educators and policymakers, and since much of our educational system of today is based on these tenets, the NEA, in fact, has been working diligently to bring education into full compliance with the blueprint presented in the Humanist Manifesto. Here is the vision of the future set forth in the introduction to the second manifesto. We stand at the dawn of a new age. Using technology wisely, we can control our environment, conquer poverty, markedly reduce disease, extend our lifespan significantly, modify our behaviour, alter the course of human evolution and cultural development, and unlock vast new powers. The ultimate goal should be the fulfilment of the potential for growth in human personality, not for the favoured few, but for all of humankind. Only a shared world and global measure will suffice. In order to accomplish these thoroughly new age goals, the humanists intend to break down the fundamental belief systems that are the basis of our society and the Christian faith. These tenets of humanism provide one of the most diabolical pieces of propaganda ever conceived. Let me give you an example from the 17 tenets they presented in the second Humanist Manifesto. Just going to switch so I know. We've got 4 pages to go, guys. First, we believe that traditional dogmatic or authoritarian religions that place revelation, God, ritual, or creed above human needs and experience do a disservice to the human species. We find insufficient evidence for belief in the existence of a supernatural or non-theist. We begin with humans, not God, nature, not deity. No deity will save us. We must save ourselves. Wow, what a hopeless sentence. You must save yourself. If you have to save yourself, there is literally no hope. No hope. None. Wow. Second, promise of immortal salvation or fear of eternal damnation are both illusionary and harmful. They distract humans from present concerns, from self-actualization, and from rectifying social injustices. Yeah, let's not focus on anything. Let's just all focus on self, because that's doing the world so good. Sorry, guys. It just makes me so mad. I just think, how stupid are you? Like, how stupid. And they think they're so intelligent, and that's what really gets me. Third, ethics is autonomous and situational, needing no theological or ideological sanction. We strive for the good life here and now. 6. In the area of sexuality, we believe that intolerant attitudes, often cultivated by orthodox religions and puritanical cultures, unduly repress sexual conduct. The right to birth control, abortion, and divorce should be recognised. The many varieties of sexual exploration should not in themselves be considered evil. Individuals should be permitted to express their sexual proclivities and pursue their lifestyles as they desire. Everyone's got to answer to God at the end of the day. And if they want to live, a fornicating life, don't expect other people to accept that. Don't expect other people to become part of your own delusion, because that's where it crosses a line. If people want to live their life the way they want to live it, fine. I don't think anyone's got a problem with that. Everyone's got to answer to God at the end of the day. It's when they try to enforce that on people that have a different set of values and live the way that God intended, and they want you to become a part of that. No, I don't hate anybody, but I'm not partaking in something that my Lord tells me that is wrong. That's just not happening. To enhance freedom and dignity, the individual must exercise a full range of civil liberties in all societies. This includes a recognition of an individual's right to die with dignity, euthanasia, and the right to suicide. That's been going through the courts here in the UK. Ninth, the separation of the church and state and the separation of ideology and state are imperatives. The state should encourage maximum freedom for different moral, political, religious bodies through the use of public monies, not espouse a single ideology and function thereby as an instrument of propaganda or oppression, particularly against dissenters. 10th, humane societies should evaluate economic systems, not by rhetoric or ideology. The door is open to alternative economic systems. 11th, innovative and experimental forms of education are to be welcomed. 12th, we explore the division of humankind on nationalistic grounds. We have reached a turning point in human history where the best option is to transcend the limits of national sovereignty, to move forward toward the building of a world community in which all sectors of the human family can participate. Thus, we look to the development of a system of world law and world order based upon transnational federal government. We thus reaffirm a commitment to the building of the world community, at the same time recognising that this commits us to some hard choices. 13th, the world community must renounce the resort to violence and force as a method of solving international disputes. War is obsolete. So is the use of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. It is a planetary imperative to reduce the level of military expenditures and turn these savings to peaceful and people-oriented uses. Hence, 15th, hence extreme disproportions in wealth, income, and economic growth should be reduced on a world-class basis. The above tenets sound eerily familiar to what the children are being taught in most schools today. They'll also sound familiar to any of you acquainted with the basic teachings of Nazism, socialism, and the philosophy of New Agers or globalists. For that is exactly what these manifestos call for, the establishment of a socialist global order. Read the 12th and 15th tenet again carefully. They deplore the division of humankind on nationalistic grounds. While they do admit that building their world community commits us to some hard choices, what they don't tell you in the midst of their noble sounding proclamations is that those hard choices include forfeiting the freedom of our American way of life in exchange for the glories of a system so poignantly typified by other governments based on their principles. The Soviet Union and Red China, for instance. It would seem what the humanists are hoping to produce in our schools are atheistic, sociopathic globalist clones whose only allegiance is to themselves and the global values with which they are being programmed. The humanists hope to be able to program the child before the parents have a chance to infect them with their middle-class diseased beliefs in God, morality, and allegiance to this country. Through child advocacy legislation supported by American Federation of Teachers and the NEA, they hope to eventually be able to mandate compulsory education for children beginning at age 3. The younger, the better. Yeah, because the children before the age of 5, I think, they're like sponges. They absorb so much. So if the more they can get your child before the age of 5, the greater impression Satan can make on them. Because I'm not under no delusion who's behind this. The religion by any other name. John Dewey and the disciples that followed him have worked diligently to expel traditional religion and values from public schools. They seem to have systemically and deliberately censored the facts not only about basic American history, but also about the historical role that religion and Christianity have played in forming of its nation. For well over 20 years now, people like Mel and Norma Gabler have been documenting and protesting the deliberate, unmistakable humanist bias and twisting of our history in our textbooks and curricula. A study by the US Department of Education on religional and traditional values in public school textbooks substantiates their findings. Those responsible for these books appear to have deep-seated fear of any form of active contemporary Christianity. This fear has led the authors to deny and repress the importance of this kind of religion in American life. This taboo extends to Christ and Jesus. Sometimes the censorship becomes especially offensive. It's common in these books to treat Thanksgiving without explaining to whom the pilgrims gave thanks. No mention is made of God to whom the thanks was given. The Pueblo can pray to Mother Earth, but pilgrims can't be described as praying to God, and neither are Christians described as praying to Jesus, either in the United States or elsewhere, in the present or even in the past. And yet, humanist Norman Lear, founder of People for the American Way, has the unmitigated gall and hypocrisy to inform us that textbooks and curricula have deteriorated largely as a result of pressure by religious right and other groups to avoid mention of controversial subjects. Every so often, a judge in our land is courageous and honest enough, like Alabama's U.S. District Judge W. Brevard Hand, to officially recognise and deal with the persistent and pervasive influence of humanist philosophies in our textbooks. Not surprisingly, his ruling was unanimously overturned. In a 172-page ruling handed down on March 4, 1987, in Mobile, Alabama, he reiterated the fact that secular humanism is a religion and that much of the government school curriculum has been based on the tenets of that religion, in express violation of the Constitution of the United States. However, Judge Hand's court is by no means the first to declare that humanism is a religion. The Supreme Court has recognized secular humanism as religion, defining it as a sincere and meaningful belief that occupies in the life of the possessor a place parallel to that filled by the God of those believing in God. It's by no means necessary for a belief system to believe in God in order to qualify as a religion. Webster's New International Dictionary defines humanism as a contemporary cult or belief calling itself religious but substituting faith in man for faith in God, or faith in the supreme value of self-perfectibility of human personality. Any system that seriously seeks to deal with questions concerning the nature of man and the goal or purpose for his existence, as well as the nature of ultimate reality and the relationship between the two, is absolutely religious in nature. Humanism is a religion. Despite the fact that today many humanists are backpedaling on this issue as fast as they can, articles in the Humanist magazine, as well as the numerous other humanist publications, from time to time openly admit that humanism is indeed religious. In an award-winning essay published in January-February 1983 edition of The Humanist, John Dunphy proclaims, I am convinced that the battle for humankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their role as the proselytizers of a new faith. These teachers must embody the same selfless dedication as the most rabid fundamentalist preachers, for they will be ministers of another sort. utilising a classroom instead of a pulpit to convey humanist values, whatever subject they teach. The classroom must and will become an arena of conflict between the old and new, the rotting corpse of Christianity together with all its adjacent evils and misery, and the new faith of humanism, resplendent in its promise of a world in which the never realised Christian ideal of love thy neighbour will finally be achieved. What an absolute... This is ridiculous. Preachers of Satan, more like. Despite the fact that the fire of Dunphy's rhetoric has proved embarrassing to some humanists, who have since written articles of their own downplaying his influence, he has nevertheless accurately voiced the passionate zeal and determination that is driving force behind many humanists today. What he said about their perspective is true. Paul Kurtz repeatedly asserts the religious nature of humanism in the preface of the first and second Humanist manifestos. Humanism is a philosophical, religious, and moral point of view as old as human civilization itself. In 1933, a group of 34 liberal humanists in the United States defined and enunciated the philosophical and religious principles that seemed to them fundamental. To establish such a religion is a major necessity of the present. Yet when asked to testify in the Alabama textbook hearings about the nature of humanism, this same Paul Kurtz said that the term refers to humanistic development and is non-religious. It uses science, reason, and evidence to test the theory. One must conclude it's been a while since he read through the manifesto he helped draft and edit. Why are humanists intent on all this current public disavowal of the religious nature of humanism? Because they now realise that if humanism becomes widely recognised as religious, it will become much harder for them to maintain and promote their doctrines in our public schools. Some humanists have even gone so far as to claim that secular humanism doesn't even exist. The fundamentalists have made it all up in order to have a basis for sneaking their own agenda into the schools. The NEA is in this camp. Others incorrectly try to equate humanism with humanness, as in humanitarian and deeply concerned for the welfare of humanity. If you can deeply concerned for the welfare of humanity as a Christian, preach hell. Talk to them about salvation. In fact, one professor who was sued for implementing humanism in a Kansas City public school in August 1979 defended himself by quoting the Webster's New World Dictionary definition of humane, having what are considered the best qualities of mankind. Kind, tender, merciful, sympathetic. When my case was tried in court, the above definition was accepted as the philosophy that I was implementing in the public schools. I was allowed to continue teaching and promoting humanism. Elementary, my dear Watson. Paul Kurtz, in his book In Defense of Secular Humanism, argues that it's untrue to say that schools are dominated by secular humanists because while there are at least 3 million teachers in the United States, there are only 10,000 members of humanist organisations. Surely they do not dominate the schools. But this point totally begs the question. A teacher doesn't need to carry on official Humanist Association membership card to ascribe to their philosophy and principles and to implement it in the schools. A criminal doesn't need to leave his official calling card at the scene of a crime in order to be identified. All Sherlock Holmes needs in order to find the perpetrator is some kind of clue that will tie the subject to the scene of the crime. The humanists have left their fingerprints all over the school system's books and curricula. Text after text, program after program echoes the philosophy of humanism stated in their manifestos. Their own writings have continuously heralded their intent. They've been implementing their plan, and we have the casualties to prove it. Even Watson could put that one together. Once the religious philosophy of humanism became firmly entrenched in our society, the stage was set for the next logical step, the introduction of a cosmic humanism, which today we know as the New Age movement. And the next one is Your Teacher, the Occultist. That's chapter 3. That's going to be a good one. I really like that book. It's just so eye-opening. Like, these things are already going on in school, but when you can see how it's been implemented, where it's come from, and how the plans progressed, it's just they just play around with the words, don't they? It's like semantics. They try and backtrack even on what they've said themselves, like, oh my gosh. No wonder the Bible says you will know them by their fruits, because do not look at what they say. What is the fruit of this humanism? You can see it in the world today, and it is not good. It's a rot. It's a cancer that's spreading through the world. Kids are lost more now than ever, and I feel like I've got such a burden on my heart for children, because they're just lumps of clay, aren't they, really? You know what I mean? Being moulded by the world. I think parents don't parent like they used to. They don't have the same values. I think but most parents are too interested in what's going on here than actually what's going on in their own home. They're letting their kids go out in the street like, where are you? What you doing? Who you with? You know? It's just like, yeah, go out. Like, anyway, I could get on a rant and talk about this all day, but then we'll have an extremely long video. So I hope you find that informative. And if you are considering like homeschooling and stuff because you are concerned with these things, it's the best thing you could do. Yes, sacrifices have to be made. But, if you're a Christian, you can trust on the Lord to provide your needs, if you're doing something that He's called you to do. But seek the Lord in it, So, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you all in the next video.